What's cracking, everybody? Felrose here, bringing you some Pokemon Go Badly content. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the upcoming Willpower Cup, which rotates in this Thursday. What is it, November 3rd, I think? Well, I checked my calendar. We're going to be going over the meta today in the usual fashion. Going to group up the Pokemon as usual, going over the darks first here on this first page, and it is indeed the 3rd, I guessed correctly. So we'll sort of start filtering down here, and obviously the first thing you're going to notice is that the darks are the predominant type in this meta. Why is that? Because a lot of the dark types in this meta have play over all of the types in the game, so, or at least in the cup. So you think about it, psychic type completely shut down by dark types typically. Fighting types typically beat dark types, but things like Mandibuzz with Aerial Ace and Air Slash, Umbreon having access to psychic, and then like Sableye being a ghost type, a lot of those have a lot of play against fighting types. So there's a little bit of an RPS going on here with the circle of these three types, but overall there's a lot of Pokemon that kind of fill the gaps, and you're seeing some strong picks already right here up in the front. So Mandibuzz and Umbreon are going to be the first two here, and honestly, they're probably going to be two of the most common Pokemon in this cup, alongside Sableye. All three of them fulfill a very strong role of like a safe swap or just a tank in general, and all three of them also share a very strong weakness to Charm, which is very underwhelming in this cup, I think. We'll talk about the Charmers by themselves and why I feel like Charm is actually overhyped in this cup. But essentially, you've got Mandibuzz with Air Slash, Aerial Ace, and Foul Play. You could run it with Snarl if you wanted to, but it's really something that I think that in this particular meta, you're going to get a lot more out of it with Air Slash, because then you're doing all resisted damage all the time. Umbreon, if you've played Umbreon, you know how spammy and how strong this thing is. The bulk is insane. And if I'm honest, you could honestly roll with the Psychic version if you wanted to, but I think that for most cases, Last Resort would be the better move to roll with here. Sableye, as we've seen in every cup that Sableye's in, it's a de facto safe swap, has the greatest coverage in usual Great League form. You're going to have Foul Play, Return, and you can even power one up with Shadow with Power Gem if you wanted to also to play that. But typically the one with Return is significantly just more consistent, and especially because if you've got the Power Gem version, it gets shut down by fighting types because both types will be resisted. So typically you want to go with the Return version here, and even though things like Mandibuzz, Quillfish, Drapion, Umbreon, and Rapidash are here, you put up more than one shield against these Pokemon, and most likely Sableye has a chance to flip them all. So you need to be very, very aware that Sableye will probably be on every other team in this meta. So just keep that in mind as you play. And then we've got the Dark Poisons, which starts up with Quillfish, Hisuian Quillfish specifically. Typically it wants to run Poison Jab, but you could certainly run it with Poison Sting and make it a little bit more of a Drapion-esque kind of Pokemon. But using Quillfish, Drapion, Overquill, all three of them kind of fill a very similar role, and they all have a very similar moveset. Overquill and Hisuian Quillfish both have Aqua Tail. They also run Dark Pulse, Sludge Bomb, Shadow Ball, and Ice Beam. So like the other thing about that is they have a very flexible moveset, and they could literally be running anything. So it's just a matter of guessing the moveset, but most of them are going to probably run Aqua Tail, Shadow Ball. Now, you could also run a Dark Pulse or a Sludge Bomb just to kind of have more neutral options against some of the meta, but if you're going to go neutral coverage, I'd probably go Sludge Bomb. Shadow Ball is still pretty solid, though, because you're still hitting basically anything that's not a Dark type in this cup for neutral or super effective damage. You have Aqua Tail for the rest, so... Muck also kind of features itself here as a similar role to the Skuntank and the the Poison Jab version of Hisuian Quillfish and Overquill. They all kind of like have an intermingling role where it's just, have strong Poison Jab damage with charge moves that can pressure shields. You guys have used them plenty enough in the meta that we've had them along enough that you should probably be aware. But if you're not aware, so we've got Grimer and Muck. So Grimer's got Crunch, Sludge Bomb. Muck has Sludge Wave and Dark Pulse with Poison Jab, so slightly different moveset. I think Grimer's a little bit cheaper on the moveset. So if you've got the XL Grimer, probably the better one to run over the Muck, but Muck being down here at number 38 and XL Grimer being up here at 15. So significant difference in the rankings. Probably better to run the Grimer if you got it, but most people don't have access to it. they just have the muck. So and then we've got the Skuntank, which is going to have access to the Crunch, Sludge Bomb, and the Flamethrower, so some good coverage options there. I'm not 100% sure that Flamethrower has a ton of really viable targets here. Most of the time you're probably going to be throwing the Crunch, so you could definitely run Sludge to get some more neutral coverage with stab damage. Getting past the Dark Poisons, though, some slightly more interesting picks arise. So if you've been playing Halloween Cup, you've probably been aware that Pawniard is a thing, and Pawniard, in this meta, having a Steel type, helps it to mitigate its damage and have better effect against the Dark Poisons because it resists the poison damage twice over. So, also having access to Night Slash, access to Iron Head, if I could just find Pawniard in my rankings here. Yeah, so it beats most of the dark types, especially the bulky ones, because having Fury Cutter means it's doing super effective damage every turn, which really helps it here. However, it gets completely smashed by things like Medicham and other Pokemon that have counter. So like if you're talking about Scrafty, you're talking about Obstagoon, those will just rip right through a Pawniard. So you do got to be a little bit more careful when it comes to that. But I mean, honestly, I do expect Obstagoon and Scrafty to be fairly, common because of the typings of this cup. I don't think that the fighting types are just going to run all over everything. So, I mean, it's going to be a three-way type circle, triangle, RPS sort of situation. But speaking of things that melt to fighting types, you've got Alolan Raticate, which has the upgraded Quick Attack from this season, and you typically want to run it with a Purification form that has Return. Unnecessary English. It's late. Leave me alone. You're running it with Return because that gives it a strong stab nuke, similar to Sableye. It just doesn't have the Shadow Claw. It has instead. It's got the Quick Attack, which is, I mean, essentially the same energy gain. So again, if you know the same counts, it's the same stuff. So, but Raticate kind of melts to the fighters and the fairy, the pony. We love the pony. But it has a lot of play. It even comes close to being Mandibuzz with the Return. And so, like, Alolan Raticate is, if you've got one built, it could be very good here. You just have to keep it away from things with counter and fighting damage. And to the vein that we expect things like Mandibuzz, Umbreon, and Sableye to run rampant in this cup, Zweilous is looking primed for another meta that it could just steamroll through on the first couple of days. So if you don't have a Zweilous built, probably not a bad build if you've got a good one you've been holding on to since the community day. Just running it with Body Slam, Dragon Breath is a fast move, Body Slam, and Dark Pulse is its charge moves. I think that Zweilous is in a really good spot in this meta because off the cuff, people are going to want to run and gravitate towards Sableye, towards Umbreon, towards Mandibuzz, and Zweilous just manhandles them all. So just something to keep in mind before you get into the Willpower Cup in a few days. So on this next page, I've kind of crammed all of the fighting types that I think that you'll be seeing into one page. So let's go ahead and talk about these. So most of these are going to be fighting, but there are going to be a couple that aren't on the fighting, like Obstagoon isn't a fighting type itself, but it's on here because it fills more of a role. Like Scrafty and Obstagoon are spillovers from the dark slide, but the dark slide, but they've got counter, which means that they are basically pseudo fighters in Obstagoon's case or straight up fighters in Scrafty's case. But Medicham is going to be the top fighter in the cup because it's basically the fighter that beats all the other fighters, plus it can beat dark types, and it's just like pure psychic types kind of screwed over, but overall, like, it has, everybody's got a Medicham. You're going to see it. It's going to be another one of those things where you're going to see like Medicham, Sableye, and something else, trying to mimic the Bastiodon, Sableye, Medicham trio. So, but it beats, the Dark Poisons because it has the counter damage. It beats Umbreon. It doesn't beat Mandibuzz, however, if the Mandibuzz is running Air Slash, and most of them, or all of them, honestly should be. So do keep that in mind. And Cresselia completely just kind of destroys Medicham because the Ice Punches tickle, and Moonblast hits it for super effective. So Cresselia is going to be a really popular counter swap, I think, or maybe even a lead in this meta because it has the Moonblast and it's a pure psychic type, which basically means that it has play against the entire triangle of types here. Having Moonblast to hit the darks for super effective, hit the fighting types for super effective, and the psychic types don't really have a lot of play against it because most of the psychic types in this cup Cresselia resists their damage. So we'll talk about Cresselia when we get to the psychic types. We're not quite there yet. But, you know, you've got... So we talked about Medicham. Sneasler is Monka TOS, right? Sneasler, if you've got one, some people have an actual legit Sneasler. Some of them work TOS. I'm not judging you. If you got one, great. It's a good core breaker, because the thing that I noticed is that bug damage, like in the Psychic Cup, if something has bug type damage, it's in a really good spot, because it hits the dark types for super effective. It hits the psychic types for super effective. So that's 2 of the 3 types, dark and psychic, it hits for super effective. And fighting types, it kind of walls, because it doesn't wall, but because it's really, really squishy, but it resists the fighting types because it has the poison subtyping. So essentially what you've got is something that has an immense amount of play against all 3 types. And the nice thing is that even if you don't have a Sneasler, if you have a Hisuian Sneasel, which you don't need to break the TOS to get, you can use that with Poison Jab rather than Shadow Claw. And honestly, you're probably better off running Poison Jab on these things anyway, if I'm being honest with you. Shadow Claw is great, and it's going to have a lot of uses, but, you know, Poison Jab is still going to be really good, neutral-ish damage in most cases. So I'm pretty sure the energy gain is the same too, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, you could use that as well, and that makes Sneasel, because of the X Scissor and how hard it hits with those moves, it makes it very interesting. And having access to close combat just to nuke something is just such a strong, you know, strong thing to have in your back pocket. So Lucario is here at number 27, just under Sneasler, and it is frail as all get out, but it has access to Shadow Ball, and it can pop itself to the moon. So that's why Lucario typically runs really high on the Sims when in meta like this, because it can pop itself and then land a Shadow Ball, and usually that's enough to KO something if it doesn't straight up resist the Shadow Ball. But the fact of the matter is, the only thing that the Lucario is really going to have a lot of play against is the dark types, obviously because it's fighting type, and somewhat the psychic types, like Cresselia, something like that. You got to land the power-up Shadow Ball. Otherwise, you have to land, land a couple Shadow Balls. Like, Lucario will melt to most of the Pokemon in this cup, because there's a lot of bulkier Pokemon that do the very similar thing. But I know that my buddy Trainer Rem is going to find a way to make it work. He's going to make it cool, because he's a Lucario guy. You know him. Yeah, so Machamp is another, you know, kind of just fighting type that everybody knows about, everybody loves, right? It's got the Cross Chop, Rock Slide, you know, basically always has neutral coverage against everything, which makes it really powerful. And even the Rock Slides, like, against things that typically don't want to take a Rock Slide, like, you can Cross Chop bait and threaten shields and easily with that. So, you know, one of the strongest dark type counters, Shadow Machamp can power through a a regular Sableye, so that's really handy to know. Also takes care of pretty much all of the dark poisons because of that, you know, just that high amount of raw damage that Machamp can put out. But if you look at the psychic types and the fighting types that resist fighting type damage, so like Medicham and Sneasler, because they're fighting type, they resist the Rock Slide, and because of their poison / psychic typings, depending on what you're talking about, resist the fighting type damage itself. So typically in those situations, Machamp is not going to do so hot, but you throw Payback on it, and I bet you can nuke a few Cresselias with it. That'd be kind of cool. So Scrafty, real quick, since he's on the rankings here, I don't expect to see a lot of Scrafty, to be completely honest. It just doesn't seem as likely. Because you know, obviously it's going to be there to try and take care of Umbreon. Even Sableye is not a great matchup for it. It's really close and bait dependent. And then you've got things like Sneasler, which kind of do its job but better, to be honest. I'm just going to be honest there. But Scrafty does a very, very good job at dealing with a lot of the psychic types, because that foul play damage is a lot, and if you let it, counter swap against an Umbreon, get some pups going, and that thing's going to rip some shields, and it's just a menace at that point. So there are obvious benefits to using Scrafty, but at the same time, in a meta that is currently overhyped with Charm and with Mandibuzz with Air Slash being the #1 Pokemon on the rankings, Scrafty's probably going to fall a little bit short for a while. It might have, a swing of the meta where it comes in and starts dominating, then everyone's making a video about how this forgotten about Pokemon had swept the Willpower Cup, but truthfully, I don't see it being an important pick, but it may eventually come into the meta at some point when everyone's running Triple Dark Poison, like Mad Lads. So, we're not going to talk about Glade yet, because I don't want to. We're going to skip down here a little bit. Como, Hakumo. So, again, Melt to Charm, but they're bulky. You've used them before in the Fighting Cup, and then probably also in the Evolution Cup or Hakumo. Como, you know, if you've got one, great. If not, probably don't need it in this cup. It's not one of those must-haves like it used to be in Fighting Cup. But for those of you who do have it, you probably are aware of how much damage those Dragon Tails do and how nice and spammy the Dragon Claw Brick Break damage can be. So it's definitely something to appreciate. And because a lot of these Pokemon were in the Fighting Cup already, you might have a reasonable amount of expectation for what you can expect out of your Como and Hakumo, because most of these Pokemon are in there already. So Buzzwole is, I think, a really interesting pick here, because let's talk about it, right? Probably not going to do great against Mandibuzz if it's using Air Slash, but has Lunge and Superpower and Counter, and that hits 2 of the 3 types super effectively. You've got bug damage for both Psychic and Dark, and you've got Superpower to hit Dark types if you need to, but you've also got a bug subtyping, which resists fighting. So I feel like Buzzwole is going to be very, like, not so high on the rankings, but very, very good Pokemon for this cup, because basically, if you've got a moveset that can hit 2 of the 3 types for super effective damage, and one of them is a debuff move, and your typing resists the other type, I feel like that this thing is going to mitigate some of the RPS factor from this cup, so it might help it to, you know, it might help you to be able to run one. I think I'm considering putting my dust into it if I can get the spare dust. Being an Ultra League faction specialist is difficult. I have an expensive job. I never have Stardust, so I don't think I can build a Buzzwole, but I would definitely expect that it will be good. Anyway, Toxicroak coming in at the last thing on this page. It's unfortunately, you know, been relegated all the way down to number 42 because of all the other Pokemon in the cup, but absolutely hardest answer I can think of to the Dark Poisons. Resists most all their move sets completely, and the counter damage, as always, is just immense. But obviously will fall short against the Mandibuzz running Air Slash. Sableye, obviously, because it's a ghost type. Medicham resisting the counter damage and having access to just booming in one shot with Psychic. And then Cresselia and Rapidash having the fairy damage is just, and the bulk and resisting the counters, is just, you kind of get the picture painted for you at that point. So let's move on. And we'll talk about the Psychic types. So in this meta, remember Psychic Cup? What a great meta that was. It was all Psychic types, but it was all like the weird Psychic types that you would never use otherwise. Alolan Raichu was one of my favorites from that cup, because it could just demolish shields, and then the rest of the game was so easy after that. And it beats Air Slash Mandibuzz very nicely. It also can beat Victini, can beat Galarian Rapidash because Galarian Rapidash is frail. It can even beat Cresselia by landing the wild charges. It can also beat Medicham because its psychic typing allows it to really, you know, not have to worry about taking a ton of damage from the counters. However, the straight up dark types and things that have Shadow Claw kind of just rip through Alolan Raichu here. So take that for what you will. It's definitely a very strong, you know, just destroy the opponent's shields and then get advantage kind of Pokemon. So if you're running a team maybe centered around a core that doesn't really focus as much on alignment as it does grabbing shields and demolishing things, like if you've got a Sneasler or a Hisuian Sneasel, you can rip shields away from your opponent with the Raichu and come in with the Sneasler or Sneasel and let them go to work. Because if your opponent has no shields, they can't shield the nukes that come from those Pokemon. And you're most likely going to destroy some faces with it. I don't really want to talk about Wobbuffet because it has Charm. And the strongest version of Wobbuffet is Shadow Wobbuffet with Frustration and Mirror Coat. So it's literally Wobbuffet with no charge moves. It's just straight Charm Fit. But if you've got the purified Hundo Wobbuffet, you could put Charm on it, or you could put Counter on it. I don't care. Either way, I'm not running a Wobbuffet in this cup, but this thing is going to be out there, and if you see it, it's going to destroy you. It is so bulky, and it has no attack stat, but the charm damage is so strong that it will still beat things. Let's see how much damage it can beat Mandibuzz. Let's see how much damage a charm does to Mandibuzz. Do you see this? The charm. It does 8 damage. It does 4.5%. It does 5%. It takes that long to take out a Mandibuzz, but it still does it. Even though it's taking super effective damage from the foul plays, it doesn't care. And I think it's disgusting. So if you've got a Wobbuffet, enjoy your run to legend. What?
I'm confused. Is the Wobbuffet a good thing or a bad thing? Because I'm getting a lot of mixed.
It's a disgrace, but if you've got one, it's easy claps for you to defeat somebody with.
Okay, so you're basically just angry because you don't have the dust to make one of your own.
No, I can have the dust, but I don't want to run it because it's a degenerate thing to do.
Just like Chansey.
It is exactly like Chansey. It will never get to charge moves, and when it does, it's going to do no damage. But because it's so bulky and it's got charm, it's going to just go tink, 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 and just like shrug off all of the attacks that are coming its way, even if it's super effective damage. However, if you've got super effective damage in mass, like if you've got Sableye or Umbreon doing constant super effective damage to this Wobbuffet, that will actually be able to overpower some of the charm damage that it's putting out. So, but like it has very, very few hard counters. Like let's look at Wobbuffet versus the whole Willpower Cup, because this thing needs to be talked about. Look at this. Look at this. Its hardest counter is Drapion. Its hardest counter is Drapion. And the Drapion only walks out with no energy and a little less than half HP. So, yeah, that's its hardest counter, Shadow Drapion. The only charmer that it can beat in the 2 sheets. I hate this so much. Even Victini has a hard time taking that. Look at this. Victini is going to be able to deal with this thing, sure, but at about the same rate. It's got to quadruple debuff itself in order to take out the Wobbuffet, dude. This is just, if you've got Wobbuffet, have fun making other people want to quit the game. That's all I can really say about it. All right, anyway, let's move on because I've talked about this thing way too long. I hate Wobbuffet. Cresselia is here as a less degenerate method of dealing fairy damage. I actually like Cresselia in this meta a lot. It's a very safe pivot. Even against the dark types that it loses to, like Quillfish, Sableye, Umbreon, Mandibuzz, it can threaten back with Moonblasts, and with multiple shields, it might actually be able to even take those matchups, depending. Not reliably, obviously, but, you know, things like Toxicroak, Zweilous, Medicham, Sneasler, and Glaring Rapidash. Glaring Rapidash is like hard win or hard loss. Very fun Pokemon to use, but Cresselia is just, it's going to be a very solid Pokemon, so if you've got one at Great League CP, this is a good place to use it, because it has play against all the types. Maybe you even consider running one with, actually, I don't even know if like, Grass Knot doesn't feel necessary. I don't think you'd really want to run Future Sight, though, because it's so expensive. So, like, Grass Knot's just a bait move, I guess, but either way, it's still helpful. It's still good. Especially if you start seeing people bring out the Clay Dolls from Psychic Cup. That's going to be fun. Victini, you all remember from Psychic Cup. So, Victini got the new Quick Attack. It's literally 5 Quick Attacks to a V-Create, and that's insanely strong damage for something that's so cheap. So, if you've got something like Cresselia or Rapidash, or just essentially things that resist the damage, Victini is a super strong option. However, dark types and things that deal constant ghost type damage or dark type damage, probably not going to be great matchups for Victini just because of how quickly those moves add up. Victini is not super bulky, so you do have to be careful. Now let's talk about my favorite pick in any cup that it's able to be used in, Glaring Rapidash. I love Glaring Rapidash. It is so much fun because the opponent has to know the counts for the moves, and if they don't, they get nuked. Because even a body slam from a Glaring Rapidash hurts. It's so attack weak and so squishy. It's literally a glass cannon. It is really a glass cannon, but it is so spammy and it can just do so much work. If it's even got Mega Horn too, so like it could literally have play against all the types in this cup. So you know, take that for what you will. Play rough is really good, but if you really want to get, you know, some nukes on, Mega Horn is not a bad move to put on this thing, and I could totally go for it. We are familiar with this thing from Psychic Cup though, so I won't go too crazy on it, but just I will be playing Galarian Rapidash because I love it. So I don't really want to talk about Lugia as much. Like it's okay, it's good, but it's very hard to obtain, and I'm not really, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't seem like it would be something that would be very common, but you might see it. It was in Psychic Cup, and it's got Dragon Tail. It's got Sky Attack and Aeroblast, probably one-shots half the things in the cup. So if you see it, just at least be aware of it. But I don't really want to talk about it a whole lot because you're not going to see very many of them. Mew, however, you know, from almost any Great League meta that it's able to be in, it is in this cup. It is allowed because the dark types are allowed. So it's not going to be the hardest thing to beat in the cup. But obviously you can see that pretty much every dark type beats it as it's running Shadow Claw. You could put any moveset on Mew though. You can run any moveset, and you know, it's still a wild card. It's like, you know, running Hisuian Quillfish, but like with at least a Swiss Army knife of like 10 different attachments more than that one has. So just Mew will be out there, and it will be with who knows what moveset, but be careful, right? So Deoxys comes in as another pick here that I wanted to talk about. You all know Deoxys by this point. You've played Great League for any length of time. You've seen Deoxys. You know that it's a counter user, and it's got access to Thunderbolt, Rock Slide, and it's got the Psycho Boost. And it's a super strong, bulky Pokemon that has a lot of consistency to its moveset. But you get locked in against something like Umbreon, or the Galarian Rapidash with Mega Horn would one-shot this thing. I'm not even kidding. A pure Psychic type like Victini, well, not Victini, but like Cresselia, or something that resists the counter damage, essentially. It makes Deoxys sweat. And Sableye is not on this list, but that's probably one of the hardest counters in this cup to Deoxys. Now, Hypno's also pretty good against it. Let's I want to talk. That's not what I wanted to open up. Hold on. I'm going to find the Galarian Rapidash. I want to see how much Mega Horn does to Deoxys, because it needs to be known. It needs to be publicly made available for everybody to know that information. Also, you beat it by landing one player off and going straight Body Slam. It's because you double resist the counters, and they have to hit you with Rock Slides, and Rock Slide does them easily 40%. So have fun clowning on Deoxys with the pony. But I want to see how much Mega Horn does. 71%. It almost claps a whole Deoxys. That's amazing. All right. Anyway, so we'll talk about Hypno, because, and the reason why I'm bringing Hypno up is because it's a really good wall to things like Medicham and Deoxys, because it has Shadow Ball, which makes that a really, really good threat. But it's also got any one of the elemental punches. You could put Focus Blast on this thing. Like it's another toolkit kind of Pokemon that you can put on just about any moveset and still be cool with. But you know, beats the fighters, can beat most of the psychic types. The dark types kind of clown it though, so you know what's going on here. So group number 4 is the Misfits, and I want to talk about each one of these just briefly, because I know that the video's almost at a 30-minute video. This is a big cup though, to be honest. So but I will keep some timestamps in there, so it won't be. So I did want to talk about Lugia. I guess I put it here though in kind of the Misfits section. So Lugia is the flying psychic type. It's very bulky, we all know. It has an insane amount of stat product along with its CP. So dark types are going to really have a really good time against this thing, except for Mandibuzz, because Mandibuzz, again, it loses some of these things that you think it would win, but that's only because it's running the Air Slash version. If it ran Foul Play, it would be right up there with Umbreon with most of these matchups. But it will lose to basically things that can vastly outpace or outdamage it. Galarian Rapidash is good because of the fact that Lugia wins the Dragon Tail, but like Lugia is kind of okay. The flying type damage is mostly unresisted in this cup, or super effective. So like against something like Medicham, for example, a Sky Attack or an Aeroblast would just decimate it. But at the same time, you've got to also remember that, you know, fighting types like Sneasler that have the constant super effective damage, those are going to be able to take out a Lugia in the one shield. So moving on up to, let's go talk about Malamar, because I know Malamar is going to be on people's minds from Psychic Cup, but to be completely honest, like this thing struggles mightily against other dark types that have bulk to them, because the only way that Malamar's doing that damage to those dark types is by superpower, and by debuffing itself, it's putting itself in a very bad spot. So it's not going to be dealing with anything really substantial in this cup. There's many different better dark options that have, you know, maybe fighting type coverage. I don't know how many of them have fighting type coverage, but you can get fighting type coverage from superpower and dark damage from better sources. They're all in one neat little package with Malamar, but I don't think that this is the place to really bust out your Malamar unless everybody's running Cresselia Pawniard, and then that's the time where you can just let your Malamar loose. But I don't really foresee it happening. But Heracross is interesting because it's got the same typing as Buzzwole, and it's got a very similar coverage to it, right? It has the counter, it's got the Mega Horn, it's got also access to things like Close Combat and Rock Blast for a bait move. So it's going to fill a very similar role to Buzzwole, so it's good to keep in mind if you don't have the ability to afford a Buzzwole. Maybe you've already got a Heracross built. Very similar role that is being filled there by that Heracross. Where is Claydol? Claydol, you guys know Claydol from the Psychic Cup again. That's something that just kind of dicks on a hole and Raichu and Toxicroak and Sneasler. But other dark types like Mandibuzz and Sableye and even Umbreon. Cresselia's got the Grass Knot. You know, Rapidash could beat it too with Mega Horn or Play Rough. It's a slow Pokemon, but it's a really interesting pick, and it would certainly have some play here, I think. It's certainly got the stats for it. Just the moveset, like the Mud Slap, is not as great. So, Galarian Slowbro is interesting if you see an influx of the fairy subtypings like Rapidash. But if I'm being completely honest, like it is going to just fall to dark types. Like you can put Focus Blast on it, make it a good safe swap, but overall, I don't think that Slowbro is going to have a ton of play here. Jirachi, I want to talk about though, because Jirachi has Dazzling Gleam to hit back against those dark types that come in against it as a psychic type. So just keep Jirachi in the back of your mind as a steel type. It's got a very good matchup against the non-fighters and non-straight dark types in the cup, and it can do a lot of damage with the Doom Desire and the Dazzling Gleam. Tyranitar, as you've seen lately in the Halloween Cup, the Tyranitar having the smackdown damage just makes it a real that's why I couldn't find anything, because I was still filtered. Tyranitar, especially Shadow Tyranitar, like against Mandibuzz, Umbreon, any flyer in general, even Victini, like it has the ability to farm almost half the things in this cup down. But at the same time, Medicham and Obstagoon and Scrafty will clown it like no one's business. That is Maggie. She is up and about. She's like, I want to be in the video, Dad. Get me on camera right now. I need to be cute for everybody. All right, come here, you silly goo. Come here. Since I don't want to sleep, I'm going to get on the camera. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. There you go. Oh, look at that. Look at that face. She's totally ready to be here. I don't know what you're talking about, Dad. Just talk. All right, and then finally we've got Primeape. I like Primeape as a pseudo fighter. Well, not a pseudo fighter. It's a straight fighter. But Primeape has Night Slash to hit the psychic types that may come in against it. That is not what I'm talking about. Primeape also has Ice Punch, so it can deal with things like Mandibuzz with the ice type damage that it can put out. But it does struggle a bit against ghost types, obviously, like Sableye. You know, the pure psychics or Rapidash. Rapidash keeps popping up on the lists here, and that's why I like it so much. Mandibuzz does still beat it going straight Air Slash, so it's just Primeape's very attack weighted too, so it can do a lot of damage. But speaking of a lot of damage, this is the page that I don't want to talk about. But I know that you people are out there and you're going to be running Charmers, and these are the lists. This is the full list of every Charmer in this cup. So for all you degenerates out there who really want to play tap phone game, oh, see, you don't like it either. You don't want them to play tap phone game. You say, people, don't do that. That's bad. Tap phone game is bad. Gallade with Charm is, you know, obviously you guys are going to see it. People are going to run it. But the thing with Gallade with Charm is that look how far down the rankings it is. It's number 30. It loses. I wanted to see it lose to Mandibuzz. I really hope it loses to Mandibuzz, because that would be really funny. Does it? Oh, it's a straight tie with Mandibuzz. Charm Gallade can't even beat Mandibuzz in the straight one shield. It is a tie. if that helps you make that decision, it's really not worth it. Umbreon only loses because of Charm. Oh, baby. What's the matter? Someone's upset. Wobbuffet with Charm we talked about already. I mean, I don't really need to talk about these. I just want you all to be aware of them. You're probably only going to see like maybe 1 or 2 of these. You're probably only going to see Gallade and Wobbuffet, and you might see Leopard. I doubt it, but it's a shadow and somebody's going to run it. So have fun with your Charmers if you run them. I'm not doing it. No way. All right, so on this last page, I've put together some cores and some save swap kind of Pokemon that you can kind of try to be aware of here. This is a really wonky cup where it's so RPS that it's like you can take any of the 2 types, core them together, and then just hope that you win, beat against the third. So Deoxys, Double Dark, Deoxys being really weak to ghost types, and honestly, just in general, just that, like in the pure psychic type. So the things that best you're going to beat that are something like a Alolan Raticate or Mandibuzz. Even Umbreon could be a good one here. Sableye works as well. But just essentially you got Deoxys and 2 things that beat the Darks and Ghosts, essentially. Obstagoon and Raichu fit very nicely together as a core. It's just a sim core though. Like I was putting some cores together just to see what I could come up with, and Obstagoon and Raichu, they do very nicely together as a core, probably because of mostly polarizing around Mandibuzz. But just overall, like the things that Obstagoon loses to in this cup, alone Raichu can pick up with the wild charges. So it's a neat core. I mean, you could even do something, like Obstagoon and then have like Raichu and Sneasler. Like I think that would be a really interesting team, being able to have consistent damage with Obstagoon, have 2 anti-fighters in the back, and just rip shields with Alolan and Raichu and close up with Sneasler. It would be a really interesting idea. Might even try it. I really feel like it. So the Victini's wireless core is essentially like, okay, Victini resists charm damage and resists fighting damage, and Zweilous deals with the ghosts and the things that Victini really doesn't care for, so it kind of makes sense, right? Galarian Rapidash and Pawniard also core kind of nicely together. Galarian Rapidash just in general is a really safe, good Pokemon to run in this meta, but you have to be very tactful with your energy when you use it. You kind of have to, be very careful because it is a very frail Pokemon. It takes a lot of skill. It's one of those like medium level like skill kind of things to start out with, but like with a lot of practice and know-how of its matchups, like that thing would just goes up here with the skill ceiling. So, and Pawniard just picks it up nicely because it beats the ghosts because of its dark typing, and it can take care of just some of the other things that in this meta that Rapidash can't really outbulk, right? And then in the middle you've got your de facto safe swaps. We've got Umbreon, Wobbuffet, because Wobbuffet really has no hard answers in this meta with Charm. You've got the Medicham and the Sableye. Now it's just Medicham because it's so bulky and has so much play against so many things that you could safe swap it if you wanted to, honestly, but it cores really well with some other stuff too. And then Sableye, as we all know, with the foul play and return damage, it can just straight save swap in anything it wants to and probably do just fine. So that's going to cover it for the Willpower Cup meta analysis. I thank you all for watching this video, and hopefully the information that you got from it was helpful. Maggie coming in here was a very nice little surprise, and I'm glad she did. She's so happy now. And just as a quick plug at the end, I do offer coaching on Metaphy, so if you're interested in getting better or improving your skills at PvP in general and GBL, Sylph, whatever, what have you, just click the link in the description for Metaphy if you're interested in booking for a session, see what it's all about, and I guarantee you that you're going to be impressed and enjoy it. Patreon is a link that will take you to my exclusive Discord for the members, and that is where you can find these kinds of analysis. The videos are early there, the teams are early there, everything's early, and there's constantly people hitting new seasonal highs, new personal bests, and it's just a great community to be in general. So if you're interested in getting all that information and just being a part of a really great group of people, check out the link in the description. I'd appreciate seeing you there, and if I don't see you there, I hope to see you in the next video. And thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all later. Bye bye.